important?
If a person did something important like that changed the course of history, or basically, or just like, or or if someone that we still have accounts for now is probably an important person. If we have like books and records about it right now.
Very cool. Anyone else? Okay, you guys are onto some really cool stuff. Let me point to some things that you guys said. So if I were to summarize what everyone said, you would say that history includes events that happen in the past that are usually significant or famous in some way or valuable. Study of life. There's famous again. That explore culture in an academic way. That's actually really important because there's a lot of things that history aren't. And that got recorded down. Well, this is super interesting. So, do you guys think that something is history even if it's not in a record? Even if it wasn't written down?
Yeah, but then we wouldn't know about it. So like
Mm.
if I like let's say lost a sock and then nobody said like told other people or passed it down that I lost my sock, no one would know I lost my sock.
Very interesting. And books or records. You guys actually, between all of you, have the entire spectrum of history here, which is epic. Okay. Well done. And that's an interesting thought about whether or not if you lost your sock, but nobody knew about it, is it history? And that's a big question because, for example, we're going to talk either today or next week about the ice bridge and how people got into the Americas. And there is a new theory that maybe people came on boats from Asia to the Americas, but we don't still have the boats. And this was before written language. So, how do we know? I mean, we do have some archaeological evidence, but it's a little bit of guessing too. And that's where history gets a little bit complicated. So, let's look a little bit more. You guys had some really interesting answers to what is history or what makes something historic. There is no right or wrong answer to this. In fact, historians like me are arguing over this all the time. What is history and what is not history? But we would probably all agree that it is an inquiry or a moment of curiosity into the process of history making, and that it includes the past. Now, the past is a pretty big thing to be looking at. So let's look at a little bit of the technical side of things. So what are we looking at here? Anyone recognize this thing? Let's see. Alice, what is this?
The past.
Okay, how so? Yes, Brian.
Like when like Jesus was born maybe like is like a different part of time to like after he was born maybe. Cuz
Okay,
like
cool. Yep.
about like the Alexander stuff, if I remember correctly, he was born before Jesus. So like I think we use like different times like BC and AD to talk about like after and before Jesus was born.
Bingo. You're absolutely right. Now, does everybody know who he's talking about when he says Jesus? Anyone not know who Jesus was? So Jesus was the founder of Christianity. The timeline that we use in the West is a Christian timeline, the way that we measure time. Now, you could get into a really interesting conversation about the measuring of time and also whether or not time even exists at all. But that's a science conversation. We're in a history conversation. And Brian, you're absolutely right. So, for the longest time as historians, the timeline that we used was based upon Christianity, which is one of the biggest religions in the West. So, this is a timeline, and it's I don't know why the timeline is so confusing. They couldn't have possibly invented a more confusing timeline. But how it works is that here, this is AD 1. BC stands for before Christ. So basically, the Christians, what they did was they're like, well, for us, the most important date is the year that Jesus was born. So we're going to split the whole history of the universe in half. And everything that goes backwards before Jesus was born is going to be one set of numbers. Everything that goes forward is going to be another set of numbers. Now, this is especially funny if you are a historian that studies Christianity like I was, because the actual birth of Jesus was probably around 80-40. So even the Christians didn't get this right, making it even more confusing because Jesus was not born at 81, or what Christians think are 81. But, you don't need to know that necessarily. What you need to remember is that BC stands for before Christ. AD is Latin for Anno Domini, which means year of the Lord, Lord being Jesus. So Anno Domini goes forward in terms of number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to 2024. And anything before AD goes backwards, so that the bigger the number in BC, the longer ago it was. But the bigger the number in AD, the more in the future we are. Super confusing. Now, just to add another layer of confusing onto this, a lot of us historians these days, well, actually, I'll ask you guys, do you think that we should measure time based upon Jesus?